first panel discussion. Welcome. I'd like each of you to spend some time just doing a quick introduction.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Richard Dasher. I direct the U.S. Asia Technology Management Center at Stanford. So we study the processes of innovation, we study entrepreneurship, we study how new technologies impact industry structure, and we focus on what's going on in Asia. So Philippines is one of the places that I've been looking at. I'm also faculty advisor to a student group called the Asia Pacific Student Entrepreneurship Society. They have a yearly summit, and for the last 10 years, we've always had people from the Philippines at this summit.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dennis Fernandez, and I'm chairman of SAC Silicon Valley. And my background's in electrical engineering and patent law, and I work in Silicon Valley. I also spent a lot of time in the Philippines setting up venture capital investments, and that was about almost 20 years ago.
I'm Marciano, but it's too long a name, so they call me June. As most, a million other Filipino males in the Philippines are called June. And so I'm June Paynor in the Philippines, Paynor here. I'm the Philippine Consul General. This is my last posting, and a very rewarding one at that. I've been posted to several other countries, including a stint as ambassador to Israel, ambassador to the Philippines to Israel. I've been all over the place, Africa included, Europe, and 4 postings here in the United States, including Washington, D.C., Chicago, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. And without any hesitation, I'd say this is the best. So, I guess that's where I was now. Thank you.
So why are you leaving?
Well, if it were up to me, I would. But we have a rotation, a 6-year. We are posted abroad for 6 years. We normally go home for 3 and then go back out again. But the more senior you become, you can. It'll be a combination of all this. But also because by law, we have a, what do you call this, retirement, there's a mandatory retirement age. So by early next year, I would have retired. So I'm going in there. But I told everyone last Saturday during or last Wednesday when we had our Independence Day reception, 2 of my daughters have decided to live here. And therefore, half of the time I'll be here. So I'm not leaving.
Great. He's not leaving, and I heard that you'll also be very busy with other activity that's going to be taking place in the Philippines and Asia. APEC is taking place in 2015, and I believe Consul General Paynor is going to be playing a role with all the activity that takes place that time, so that's also pretty exciting. So our panel today is Demystifying the Philippines. Personally, when I speak about the country, not everyone that I come in contact with is familiar with all the great things that are happening today. The first 2 things that come out of their mouth is pancit and lumpia, and in a general sense. Although I have seen that's changing, and what was even more inspiring and surprising to me is that even though I may come in contact with people here who are not familiar with what's going on in the Philippines, when you go to the Philippines, there are foreigners there who have decided to actually transplant themselves because they've recognized the beauty, the opportunity, and the potential. I was in Cebu in March, and there were entrepreneurs from the UK, from Canada, and from the United States sitting at one of our sessions, and I found that to be an interesting phenomenon, and I think it's happening across the country. And I'm hoping that some of our panelists here today can share some light on where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. Dennis Fernandez, as he had mentioned, actually set up Walden VC, venture capital firm in the Philippines 20 years ago. And I'd like for him to share his experience, and now looking back, what was there that was right, what didn't work, and why the country's in a better shape today, particularly from an investment standpoint, because you did come in as an investor for Walden, and you could talk about some of the challenges that you may have had, and then how that has transitioned in today's world.
Well, personally, for me at the time, I was talking with Irene, who's also my wife, the patent attorney, and we had a newborn, Megan, and I said, I'm going back to the Philippines to help the country. And just so you know, in a couple months, she's going to college now. Okay, so this is the personal window that I see. And a lot of things have changed in that time. At the time, the Philippines had been rocked with literally earthquakes, typhoons, rolling power outages. You could see bullet holes in buildings in Makati. I had to personally set up office space, team up with local corporate strategic partners. So I had two business advisors there, these two brothers from the Ayala family. So they would meet with me at their hotel restaurant, and I'd ask them, what should we do? Okay. So we were really exploring in good faith how to set up a Silicon Valley type infrastructure to promote innovation and early stage investments. But we didn't know what we were doing, frankly. So I talked with the local lawyers, and they tried to regulate the venture fund as a bank, which would have been a disaster for us. The other thing that was a disaster was about the same time, half of the seed money for the Walden Fund was actually coming from private quasi-governmental money from Singapore. But there was a dispute with the Singapore government at the time about some maid, household maid dispute. And so all the Singaporean money got pulled. And so our initial fund got cut from like 50 million to 25 million US. And then the other strategic mistake we made was we locked in at the time all the funds in Philippine pesos, which devalued by about 25% over 18 months. But now it's the opposite. If we had done that, it would have helped out a lot. We didn't know. Okay. So we learned a lot of lessons. I just want to share that with you. It was a real experience for me. That was my personal exercise to help the Philippines, because I really wanted to go back home and help. And Daga was one of my advisors here who said, you should do it, okay? And I said, I've never done this before. I'm a patent attorney. What do I know about venture capital? He goes, no, just do it. It's going to be good. You'll learn a lot.
I think he has a habit of saying that.
Yeah. So, no regrets.
Maybe Consul General Paynor can also comment on that, and what the administration, obviously there were some infrastructure issues and some other policy issues that impacted the activity taking place at that time. But things have definitely changed, and I think from administration to administration, we also see how policies have changed. And you've been with the government for a considerable amount of time, so perhaps you can comment on that, because there are also nuances in the government which I wasn't familiar with, particularly with DFA, where not only are they, serving the community here in the Philippines, but they're also involved in understanding and having knowledge of economic-related issues and the impact of things that are going on in country and abroad.
Thank you very much, Christina. Yes, I think we have to look at the Philippines in perspective, from the beginning all the way up to the present time. And it used to be when the Philippines was, as was explained earlier, was called the Pearl of the Orient, because having been the only colony of the United States, the U.S. exerted all its best efforts to recreate in the Philippines what was then present here in the U.S. And so the infrastructure, the constitution, the laws, everything was copied almost word for word. But then after 1945, when we became independent from US/Japanese rule, we've had a lot of problems. But I would just go to, and starting from 1986. The Cory Aquino administration restored democracy, and that was the major contribution of that administration. President Fidel Ramos, whom I served for 5 years as chief of protocol, did deregulation, or what he called leveling the playing field, liberalization, and privatization of state-owned entities. He did that at much political cost to his political capital. The next president, Joseph Estrada, while his term was short-lived, he had some good economic advisors, and the emphasis on agriculture especially was made focusing on farm-to-market roads and irrigation systems. The previous President, Gloria Arroyo, while her perception of her and her administration may be different these days, being an economist, she was very instrumental in what is currently prevailing in the Philippines. And what she actually did was the promotion of tollways, nautical highways, or what we call roll on, roll off. And again, a lot of political capital invested on the VAT reform law of 2005, because up until that point, one of the most difficult functions of government was to collect taxes. And by having the VAT law passed, 12% of anything that is sold went to government. So government got money. Now, the present administration of President Benigno Aquino was on the stronger push to build more highways, airports, seaports, and schoolhouses under the public-private partnership. And good governance is his main point. And I think it is because of this that investor confidence in the Philippines has returned. So in short, that is how the Philippines has transitioned from 1986 to the present. And in fact, we are up and rising. Last quarter, we had a GDP growth rate of 7.9%. And that is something to talk about. And where we had 6-point-something% throughout the whole year last year. So these are good numbers.
So what's driving the growth in GDP? What are the growth drivers there? It sounds like there's been a transition on the infrastructure side, that there was a lot going on when Dennis set up shop. The infrastructure wasn't necessarily in place. There were a lot of things that the country still needed to address, and probably policies that were not evaluated and reviewed, and strategic planning not in place. But it sounds like through the years, through the last 18 or so years, that's one of the areas that seems to be consistent. Infrastructure, whether it's in roads, infrastructure in terms of electricity, or what's needed to run and operate a business, and infrastructure in the sense of knowledge, capital, whereas in education, that's...
I think there are several factors that have contributed to this. First and foremost, I think, is what I've already said, stable democracy. Most investors, that's the first thing that they want to see. If the place is stable, they invest money, the risk is lesser. Right? Good governance, meaning easier to do business and so on. Strong macroeconomic fundamentals, and this was established during the 9 years of President Arroyo. She was an economist, And therefore, 2/3 of her administration, 2/3 of the efforts that she did was on establishing macroeconomic fundamentals. And the current administration, if I may say so, are now reaping what we call a slow-lying fruit. Labor peace. We have not had any major strikes in the past several years, where before 1986, there wasn't a day where there wasn't any strike in the Metro Manila area, not to speak of the whole Philippines. So that was one of the things that, again, if you're an investor, you have labor unrest, no, you don't put your money there. We have a young, educated, skilled, and English-speaking labor force. 50% of our population is younger than 25. So we are strategically located. So I'm sure with transport and all that, having short-term distances, etc., that strategical positioning has been diminished. But we're still strategically located. Remittances, has been discussed by Ben. And, oh, by the way, that's about 21 billion US dollars. And that's not insignificant. And lastly, we still have a lot of natural resources. We have issues in mining, but we know that we have lots of, we didn't even know that we had coal. Now we know we have coal, gold, copper, and silver. We have nickel, and vast amounts of them, but we have issues about mining, clean, green mining.
Wow, thank you. I'd like to have Professor Dasher comment, but before I do that, one thing that you said that was interesting was that the country is strategically located, and one of the observations I've made in visiting is that there are a number of Korean schools that have basically turned up all over the country, a number of Japanese, an increasingly number of foreign, what we would say foreign students from Asia, flying into the Philippines for either graduate level education or to learn how to speak English. And I think that's going to add a new twist to where things go between 5 and 10 years from now. So Professor Dasher, we'd love to hear some comments from, as an academic.
Okay. So to sort of fill in what the Consul General was saying, last year the Philippines did have 6.6% GDP growth. The rest of the world was slowing down from 5.5% to 3.3%. Also, China slowed down from 9.5 to about, 7%, depending on what you're calculating. And so why did the Philippines pick up and continue to pick up? Well, one of the things you're seeing an increase in university enrollments. Over the 10 years between 2000 and 2010, the number of students in universities who are studying IT, information technology related fields, the number of graduates went up from about 26,000 a year to over 45,000 a year. So you're seeing an increase in that. You see a major increase in people in medical and related fields in universities. So this is not just the caregivers who go overseas and send back remittances. These are people who are really building out the infrastructure in the Philippines. Average per person income in the Philippines is somewhere around $4,500 US per year. So that's still relatively low. In China now it's over 12,000 a year. And so there is still a labor cost advantage. But what you see in this kind of situation is you see the rapid development of infrastructure the first time around. There are so many opportunities. Other people would see them as things that are, the power grid needs to be better, or, the transportation system needs to be better. And what you're seeing is a large number of young people who are very entrepreneurial and who want to turn these into opportunities. So I think that's what is most exciting to me about the Philippines, is that these young people really have a lot of drive, they've got a lot of smart, and they look at problems in a different way than we do from an advanced economy. Instead of trying to figure out how we can take a $2,000 computer and sell it for, $150, they start from the beginning and look at where they are and what's around them and find a solution that raises the whole level.
That's interesting. So what you're saying is that we have a much more higher value-added services educated workforce now.
That's right,
Yeah,
and that increase is continuing. The structure of the Philippine economy is still about 12% agriculture and about 57% services. But and 30% quote industry. But that's one of those things where what kind of services are we talking about? The U.S. economy is about 70% services and less than 5% agriculture.
How would that compare to other regions in Asia? For instance, like a country like Thailand or Vietnam, and what could you share with us in terms of things that you have observed that the country seems to be doing right, or where they might encounter challenges on a going forward basis?
At this point, Thailand's economy is about twice the size of the Philippines. So it is a bigger economy. What I think we're seeing is actually more intra-Asia business between Thailand and the Philippines and Malaysia and other Southeast Asian nations. Their growth rates are all staying higher than the world average. In contrast, the growth rates of Hong Kong, Taiwan, Korea, and Singapore that have been very dependent on China's growth dropped like a rock. All four of those countries are below the world growth rate for 2012. So Southeast Asia is doing well because it's kind of developing an independent kind of major supply chain.
Did you know?
I'd just like to follow up on Professor Dasher's comment on education. And not too many of you know that there was one particular person who about 10, 12 years ago came to the Philippines and said, if the Philippines needs to move up, you have to develop more people in the science and technology venture. So he put his money where his mouth is and challenged the Philippine government to contribute an equal amount. And he spoke to about two presidents, and then he spoke to the third one, and the third one I think understood what he was talking about. 1 billion pesos into the fund, and from then on, he put up this foundation that's called the Engineering Research and Development for Technology, involving 8 major universities in the Philippines that have very strong science and technology curriculum. And they're the ones implementing the program and giving scholarships for masteral and Ph.D. programs for engineering, science, and technology. And that, I think that was one of those things that pushed our Commission on Higher Education to push for more engineering, science, technology curriculum in all of the Philippines. And that's